Hi, I'm Lloydine.
And I'm Heidi.
And we are the
U-Haulers.
So, it's Sunday.
It is.
Not when you're watching this, but currently it is Sunday. And we just went to church.
We did. We've actually been going to church this whole time.
Lots of churches, yeah.
I know that we took a break telling you about our church journey, and part of that was because we were protecting ourselves a little, right? Mm-hmm. We've had some ups and downs in this church search. But we've been planning to come back and kind of talk through some of that with you at a certain point. And today just sort of turned out to be
the day.
And kind of exciting.
Yeah. So last time we spoke about church in the Search for Church episode, we thought we'd found a church. I don't know if you remember, but we were like, we found one. We were excited. The kids liked the youth group. We had been there a few times. We were going back. And then some interesting things unfolded after that. That I just think it's important to share just because of the kind of community we have with you, that this is stuff you guys run into too, and so I think it's good to talk about. So basically the short version is, I think we had mentioned we went to a movie at the church with our kids and had a good time.
We were invited by some of our kids' friends to
go
to the
so
church.
Basically parents of, kids' friends at school. Mm-hmm. And we went and had a great time. And then we had another friend that was like, oh my gosh, yes, I know people who go to that church. You should keep going. That's a church for you. You'll really like it. And fast forward, we went another time, and there were some things that kind of raised eyebrows in the sermons a little bit. And so we got
our eyebrows.
Ours, yeah. And we got a call from someone who was I don't know if working or volunteering at the church, because we had filled out one of those like welcome cards. And she said, I just want to know if you had questions or wanted to talk about anything. And I said, well, actually, yes. So I kind of told her who we were and some of the stuff in the sermons that we, didn't really understand why was being talked about. And she was like, the pastor is really going to want to speak with you and tell you his heart about that. Like, I work with him very closely, and this is kind of what was going on. And I'm like, great, I'd love to talk to the pastor. And then a few days go by, maybe like 4 days or something, and we get a call from one of the friends that had suggested this church to us. And she was in a panic, basically, and she was like, I really would like to talk to you. And so we're like, oh, okay. So we went over to her house, and she tearfully told us that she had been having a really hard time and really struggling with something that week, and she had found out by accident, basically. She had the same people that invited us to church over to her house, and she got excited and said, oh my gosh, I told Heidi and Dean to go, that you guys go there and that they'll love the church. And they let her know that we basically were not welcome at that church. And
not basically, that's what they said.
We were not welcome. And that
because we are not a man and a woman married couple, but because we are raising children together as a homosexual couple, that we are not welcome in the church. I mean, that it was as stark as that.
And she should not have told us to go to that church or feel that we're okay or be welcomed either.
Yeah. In fact, they made it very clear that she was wrong for.
Right. So she was very upset and felt so bad because she had, recommended this church, and we were really grateful that she told us. We found out that they were elders or deacons at the church, I'm not sure which, and that when they invited us to this movie, because I'm like, they invited us to this church. It's very weird. I've never been in a situation where I was invited by someone and then uninvited by the same person, but they knew Heidi as a single mom. So it wasn't until we showed up together at this movie that and we sat next to them because they invited us. And they were clearly uncomfortable and wouldn't really look at us or talk to us, even though they invited us there, which seemed a little
off-putting
and unchristian-like. And I was like, wow, we're invited to this church, and then people inviting us don't even want to talk or look at us. Okay. But yeah, so they, were suddenly realizing that Heidi's not just a single mom, but now in a relationship, and it's not the relationship they would like her to be in, and that we no longer were welcome. And then they were seething and upset that they had invited us. So we got uninvited. So we had to, of course, talk to our kids because they had, made a connection to that church and
had friends that went there,
and so they wanted to know why we were still church shopping. And so we, had to talk with them about it. And we have amazing kids, and they, of course,
it's been interesting, right, to see how that impacted them. Because, of course, they understand wanting to go to a church community. They understand why we would do that. We want to learn about Jesus. We're building relationships with Jesus, things like this. But I think for them, it never occurred to them that we would have to kind of be taken care of in an environment like that too. And since we've had that conversation with them about not being welcome, every church we've gone to since then, we get this tiny voice from the back of the car. Did they like you guys?
Were they nice to you at this church? Because they...
Because they can make connections. I mean, they're kids, and they make connections, and it's easy for them to love and be loved. And, kids are sort of the magical connector for all people, as they should be.
Yeah.
But, and it's both encouraging to me and very challenging to be cared for by our kids, right?
Yeah, but they're very protective of us and love us deeply, and so it's kind of been a family journey. And we went to many churches, and I am involved in an upcoming documentary about a former church that I went to, and through the amazing journalists that I've met through that, said, there's this church you should check out. And normally I wouldn't just talk about the church we're going to, but I think it's so important that you hear about this church in case you are in the LA community or Southern California community. So he said, you should really try this church, New Abbey. And I had done, honestly, quite a deep dive search on churches, and for some reason this is not one that had popped up in my search. And he's told me about it a few times, and so finally I'm like, you know what, I need to really check out this church. And I, for some reason, thought it was just another, like, where he felt I'd feel welcome there, right?
We've talked a little bit about that, where there's gay welcoming.
And gay affirming.
And
I, of course, I think I said that I thought I would end up at a gay welcoming, but I totally love the idea and would love to, find a gay affirming, but that I typically end up at the gay welcoming, right? And was not finding a lot of gay affirming ones, or ones that I connected with, or if any, and ones that felt like home, if the rare time I did. But anyway, so I did not know this was a gay affirming church, and it was amazing. It was amazing. I've never walked into a church that felt like home and was accepting of me in my sexuality. I've been in a church that felt like home that I knew just loved me but wasn't accepting, or I've been in churches, very rarely have I ever been in a church that was accepting, but it wouldn't be one that felt like home. So to have that combination, I'm gonna get emotional now. I got so emotional during church, and then startled the crap out of poor Heidi, because they had
none of this is gonna surprise any of you. I was very startled.
Yeah, they had a good news time, which I didn't know. I've never been in this church. We just sat down and they had this welcoming thing, and they passed the microphone. They were like, does anyone have any good news to share? And I just looked at Heidi, I said, I have good news. And she goes, you do? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, oh dear God. And so I raised my hand, like one would do if you're going to talk on the mic. And so they brought the mic over, and I just told them, I literally said, hi, this is my first Sunday. And I just turned to Heidi and I said, I met Heidi when we were kids. And I said, and we were very conservative, going off camera, we were very conservative, Republican, virgin Christians at the time.
This is what she said in church?
Yeah.
She said those words in church. The ones that you just heard right now?
Yeah, so I said we were very Republican, conservative Christian virgins at the time when we met.
And the pastor
winked at me
and said, oh, well, you're the only ones here that are like,
and started winking.
And I was like, oh, okay.
It was amazing. And so then I said, I reconnected with Heidi. Neither of us knew we came out. And then we reconnected, many years later. And I said, and then I would come out as a friend, but I got locked down in the pandemic at her house with her 3 kids. And I said, I went from walking Fashion Week in New York City to homeschooling 3 children with a minivan in the driveway. And everyone laughed. And then I said, and now we're engaged. And I held up my hand and my ring. Everyone started screaming.
You would not, I
clapping,
mean, it was as if they
snapping,
had loved us for their whole lives.
and that they just found out we got engaged.
and they couldn't stand, I mean.
It was an uproar. It was amazing, to the point that Heidi sat there with all the attention on her. Everyone's turned and snapping and clapping and screaming. She's
red.
bright red.
Oh, just
she was
hot.
she's like, oh my gosh.
Sweating.
It went long enough that Heidi had time to turn to me and go, oh my gosh, like,
I didn't know what to do.
shaking.
I did not know what to do with myself. I was like, don't do anything embarrassing.
It was, and so we talked about it just a few minutes ago. Heidi was like, or you could tell them what you said about how you didn't even realize until this moment that to have that celebrated in a church.
Yeah, no, I don't think I ever anticipated that. I mean, like, again, I kind of always felt like we'd be welcome certain places, or that we would sort of break down the barriers and be like, well, welcome us or don't, but we're here.
Yeah.
And
But to be celebrated as ourselves in a church setting where I just got to, in announcement time, talk about our engagement without fear, without condemnation.
I was telling Dean when we came home, I said, I don't think I realized until today that every time we went to church and I mean, you guys, we told you, Dean had this whole list, and we literally were just like, okay, it's a to-do, so cross this one off, not cross them off like we'll never go, but like, okay, we went to visit, and we would fill out the cards, and we would, do all these things, and I think we mentioned it in our first episode, one of the first churches that we went to, I had to, like, sort of out loud in my mind make the decision that I was going to hold her hand when we were walking in, because I'm like, I'm not going to be closeted, right? I understand that they will see this as sin, and that they will. You've been
to a church closeted.
Yeah, I went to a church closeted for a period of time. It was a beautiful church, super friendly, welcoming, etc. But they didn't know I was gay, right? And I wasn't going to tell them.
And there were some things from the sermon to let you know that would not be a conversation.
It was never like that. It was never really from the pulpit. It was just more that, like, I know the church. Like, I know the church denomination. I know the governance of that church. Like, it wasn't like an evangelical church. It was like a church with a set up structure, culture, right? So, and it fit within that certain setup structure, right? But I, now, my kids have multiple moms, and we're going to be married. And it's not that, like, I'm coming to a church seeking, right, sort of absolution or some kind of resolution to an ongoing sinning problem that I have, right? That's not what I'm doing. So I'm looking for a church that, at the very least, will acknowledge my marriage, right? My family. And so I told Dean on the way home today, I don't think I was aware of how much I would brace myself every time we would walk into church in the last couple months. Like, real fear, right? Real, a real sense of...
Yeah, you'd feel almost like, before we walk in, I'd grab her hand, you'd feel like this tense up, of like, take a deep breath.
Take it, like, okay, get ready, right? Like, here we go. This might be the time. And
I would even, like, hold your hand, but it would be not when we were like maybe when they're praying, or we're sitting down in the pew and we're kind of sitting by ourselves, or so I wouldn't like hide it, but I wasn't like, today my arm was around you, we're holding hands, I made an announcement, and we were one of many. This was a church that was made up of different races and ages, straight, gay. It was families with kids, single, young, old.
Well, and I think too,
it was such an amazing melting pot of how Christ would want it to look, that it was, I think that's why I got I teared up, because I was like, these people, and they all kind of talked about how they, different people shared, and the theme was, I grew up in a very evangelical. There was people that talked about, going to Bible college. This amazing gay guy talked about how his ex-girlfriend from Bible college and her husband, who he secretly had a crush on, how they just started a gay-affirming church in Gainesville, Florida, which, oh my gosh, amazing. We all cheered for that. But, he's talking about Christian college and how he had a girlfriend, but now he's gay. And, it was just very much that kind of theme where the connection was just, the Jesus was so
biblical,
and the love for Jesus was so evident, and it was so authentic, and it was
because
the worship was real, and it wasn't just like this mystical spiritual journey. It was Jesus, and I mean,
I think that was the other piece of this, right? Is that Dean and I are not interested in going to a church that whitewashes that part of it either, right? Whitewashes is not the word I want, but that sort of covers over that or lays down a layer of like vague. We're not really talking about Jesus. You don't have to be offended, because that's not our faith either, right? So finding a place that we can go that does read from the Bible, that is talking about the Jesus that we grew up understanding and loving and learning about and worshiping, right? Because oftentimes, at least in my experience with gay affirming churches, there's just this layer over it that's like, look, believe whatever you believe, right? And I'm not here to speak against that or to speak, anything about that, except that wouldn't have been home for us.
Right.
We needed to find a place where we could go and be fed spiritually, according to how we understand the Bible and how that, all sort of fits together. And again, I'm the last person that would sit here and say one is better than the other. But for us, that had to be an element of it, and that was clearly present here.
Yeah.
And I think, I'll never forget one of my dearest friends on the planet, who is still someone that I cherish very much, and I was friends with her in college. And when I first came out, I had some of this similar struggle, right? How do I continue to be a Christian? How do I continue to worship? Where do I find nourishment for my soul and still be able to be gay, right? And I remember her asking me, she's like, why would you ever choose to be a part of a community that hates you? And I really, in that moment, because it was coming from such a genuine place of protection for me, such a genuine place of worry, right? Like, I love you. I don't want you to be in a world where you wouldn't feel completely loved. I was able to, there wasn't any walls up. I was able to just answer authentically. And I'll never forget it. I said, because I don't want to have to choose between Jesus and being myself. I don't think I have to. Mm-hmm. And I feel like today is probably the first time where that was an experience I had outside of myself. I don't have to choose between, Jesus and being myself. I don't have to pick. Yeah. And that's, and
we got to hear from the guy and female pastor.
Yeah, the teaching pastor was a woman, amazing.
They were both hilarious.
Yes, such good speakers and really in tune with how to take the Bible and make sure that we're reacting to it in a relevant, not only culturally relevant, but time relevant, and it was amazing.
And of course, this will offend some, but for Dean, the fact that I heard the word shit in church, I was like, this is my church. That is it.
From the pastor, which was amazing.
Yeah. And from someone making an announcement, I think.
Yeah.
Not an announcement.
Dean literally turned to me at that moment and it's like, we found my church. This is it. I was like...
Not an announcement, but sharing good news.
Yeah.
So, there's a parishioner. And you were also talking about how you... I don't know if you want to talk about this, but how you would have encountered in your life when you were single, and how it was more taken as...
Oh, well, so, my faith journey is probably something that, could take its own whole episode or so, mm-hmm. right? I very clearly walked away from the church for a period of time. I didn't denounce the church. I never said I didn't believe in Jesus. I didn't do any of those things, but I was very much like, well, all right, I believe in Jesus. It's going to just be an internal, personal thing. I'm not going to have a faith-based community because I can't, and I won't. And in my marriage, that wasn't a thing that we made significant, and so I just kind of let it go. And I lost a child during that time, and was super angry, and felt like a lot of the response I got in those instances was, well, that's kind of God's will. And so again, I just got sort of smacked over and over again by sort of the traditional relationship to Jesus, right? People that were in a relationship with Jesus just didn't know how to handle me, really. And so I just didn't keep putting myself out there, right? And then even when Dean came into my life, I was very reticent to return to church. In fact, the first 2 times she said it, I was like, it's nothing I do. I'm not doing that. And she was like, great, so we're going to church on Sunday? I was like, literally just told you, it's not a thing I do. I'm not doing that. That's not a thing. And so, I kind of came.
And then I got up on Sunday and I got ready for church. And I was like, are you getting ready?
So we went. And because Dean doesn't really, she doesn't really encounter the word no. It's just not a word she hears. But so we went, and I went because I wanted to be with her, and I was like, okay, it's kind of like a rock concert. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where we ended with it, right? Because you were like, I don't know that I'm going. I'm kind of mad at this idea, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going, and if you want to hang out with me, this is where I'm going to be, or not.
You did say like I would like you to go once.
Yeah, I mean
I want you to go one time, but like I'm not going to keep pushing. And it wasn't because like she thought I needed salvation or I needed, none of those things. It was just Dean's relationship with Jesus is very active. Like she takes an active participating role in her relationship with Jesus. So she doesn't just sort of sit back and do that privately. That's always been a very out loud thing for her. And in her world, that is a shared experience. And so she wanted to share it with
you because we had shared that experience.
Right. Yeah. So that was really when I started kind of thinking about it again. I had in the interim, I'd gotten divorced and wanted to reconnect with a community. I was so lonely after I got divorced. I didn't keep my systems of support up and very healthy during my marriage, and so and I had moved here just prior to meeting my ex-wife, and so I really didn't have a community. And this was a community I felt like, okay, I understand how to build community in the Christian world, right? Like I did that my whole growing up life, and so I really did it out of a sense of like extreme loneliness. And I found this beautiful church I was talking about before, I just was very careful. I didn't talk about. If I was talking about my ex, it was always my ex. It was never she or her. I didn't use.
So you're just a mom of 3 kids.
Mom of 3 kids, single mom, 3 kids, divorced. And like I said, the church was amazing. It was beautiful. They were very supportive, loving of me. The children's program was amazing. And you wanted me to say something specific about this, and I just went off on a complete tangent and have no idea what it is that you were asking about.
So you ran into situations where it was directly told to you the theme of...
Yes, okay. Thanks. And also during that time, because I was single, and I had decided to be single, and identified as a bi person, but wasn't talking about that. It was just more like, I'm just a mom, I'm focusing on my career, I'm going back to church, I'm building community around my faith. I encountered multiple times the idea that like, oh, this is so great. Like, God always welcomes his errant children back. Like, we're so grateful that you're returning. And I'd have this moment of like, yeah, that is amazing. Like, the prodigal son sort of story, how beautiful that is to be able to run into our Father's arms no matter what it is that we've encountered. But I would quickly realize in those conversations that the expectation was, but you can't come back and still be gay.
Yeah, so
right?
It wasn't even just like, oh, you had stopped going to church and now you're back. It was, well, obviously you fell away from the Lord, but now you're not gay anymore. So what a great story that his child has come home. And you'd be like, oh, right, and I supposed to be gay in your eyes. I see.
And it's one of those things, like, I mean, I just said this to Dean, like, there are studies, actually, that show that in, like, when they train police officers, one of the things that they have to do is train them to expect bullets, because it's in that moment of not expecting, like where you're like, holy shit, someone's shooting at me. That's the moment when like you're not protecting yourself, you're not safe, you're not ducking, you're not doing all the things that you need to do to protect yourself because you're just like so startled that there's a bullet coming at you. Whereas if you're expecting it, there will be bullets coming at me, you're going to be able to make the next decision faster. Well, that's kind of how this felt for me, right? Where I'm not expecting that. So it would be this moment of, oh, right. I'm still not accepted because I'm still gay. Just not with someone, not married anymore.
And I'm not talking about it at this moment.
Right. And I'm clearly, being respectful of the faith-based community, not asking them to accept something that isn't a present part of my life, but it was always a present part of my life. And so I would never be able to like properly respond to that because I would just be like slapped. Like this moment of like, oh, I just got slapped. What do I do now? Instead of being like, well, I was ready for that and here's what comes next. And so I could never really respond except for to say like, I'm really grateful to be welcomed back.
Yeah.
And, and that was just a polite response because I was raised well, right? Like not necessarily honest or genuine, but, I was raised to be polite. So I think we've talked about this before that I have felt very injured by the faith community in multiple different iterations of my journey with faith and with Christianity, and I think in a way that Dean was spared some, and that's why I told her at the beginning of this search for the church that I would go and I would participate and I was all in, but I wasn't going to do the research because I couldn't bear to read the stories of, the sort of the horrific things that have happened. And those were, of course, churches we didn't choose to visit. But I didn't feel like my faith was up to that, right? Up to experiencing those stories. So, but, and I think what's interesting, right, is that we will definitely have to have a hybrid structure in terms of how we go to church because this church is not set up yet.
Yeah, till they're growing and they're not ready for our age kids.
But our kids won't have like a dedicated spot yet. They were super great about that when we asked questions about it today. They wanted to have a thoughtful approach. They wanted to go out of their way to make sure that they were prepared.
They are on their way,
Yeah.
Because of they have a lot of kids in the church that, in the next couple of years, that'll be a different story. But, so, yeah, we're going.
But he literally said, send us an email when you're coming and we'll make sure that we're ready for them. And,
like,
what an incredible,
ready for your kids to come. And our kids have found a place that they are in love with. Like, they beg to go. They ask if they can bring friends. They get mad if that's not where we're going. Everything you would want kids to say about a church. So, and luckily that place has Saturday night services. So,
in fact, the Saturday night service was the one we were...
Because it has the live preaching. Because you either have to go Saturday night or really early in the morning for us, because it's kind of a drive to go, and I'm not a morning person, to go to the live preaching. So when we would go at the time, like the 10 or the noon, it would be a video where we could just stay at home, and I want a church community. So we can go on Saturday nights with our kids, and then, to our church, that church, and then we also have them every other week, right? So then when we don't have them, we can go to
New Abbey.
And...
But anyway,
and on Sunday mornings and all that. So, yeah, and it was really, I said on this podcast that I really felt that I was very firm about it. Like, I'm supposed to be in a gay welcoming church. I encourage everyone to find a gay affirming church, but I feel like God's leading me to this, And I said it because I really believed it, because that's how it's always been. But I found out really quickly as I was going through this journey that isn't where I was anymore, and that's not what I wanted. I made this big pronouncement, and then I was like, crap, like, I actually want to get involved. I was raised to not just be a pew sitter, right? And I, at the other churches, got involved a ton, but I was on a leadership track, actually, and moving up in leadership. And when I came out, I knew that was not allowed anymore. And so I stepped back and became just a volunteer, because the volunteers were allowed to be gay, but you just couldn't be a leader in any way. And so I had so much ministry of bringing people to church, and had already kind of been on the leadership track and was so happy volunteering and was so in love with my church that it didn't really, at that time, I wasn't in a place where that bothered me. But now when I'm shopping at churches and realizing that I want to get involved again, and I am going to be able to maybe volunteer, maybe not, but not anything more than that, it started to be very hard, and there's a really heavy weight on my heart about it. And I was telling Heidi, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I was starting to feel lost and discouraged, because I really felt like God was putting this on my heart, but then I was seeing nowhere where this could be
like I said,
an avenue at all.
Yeah, this journey has not been without its pain, right? Like, we've experienced pain just different levels. Like, but even, Dean's talking about being involved, not necessarily like we're expecting to suddenly become pastors or do those kinds of things. That's not what we're talking about.
I don't suggest it at all, actually.
Yeah, clearly. For me. But I think that even just being able to go to a small group, right? The work we would have had to put in, like to talk to the pastor, to talk to the small group leaders, to make sure that the group was willing to grow with us, understanding our family circumstances and the fact that we are making vows before God, and that we clearly do not think that those vows make us sinners, right? That's not a thing that we believe. So can we still grow with you? Can we still grow in your community? Even to that level, even being involved in that level, right, is something that we weren't sure we would ever be able to navigate in some of the other churches that we went to.
Which is such an important part, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't even, it's a good point, because I didn't really mean, like, even necessarily wanting to get into leadership at a church again, but it was more the thought of, anytime I volunteer at any other church, it was not because that's just where they needed me and I was happy to do it. It was the only level I was allowed to do. And it was very apparent. Versus now, if I volunteer like at a gay affirming church, it is because they need me and love me and I'm just a part of the community. And that is just a really big difference. And it's very freeing. And I didn't really know that was going to be something that I was at a stage looking for right now, but it really was. And God knew. He was really putting on my heart and preventing me. So I just kept searching. I found great churches, lots of them, but I just kept searching. And I didn't even know what I was searching for, but he kept kind of laying this on my heart. And I was like, okay, God, I don't know where you're sending us, because I don't know if you know. I don't think it exists in LA. It should. It's a very progressive city. But the one that I'm looking for, I just, I was really struggling. And in fact, I had this church suggested to me before, and it hadn't even kind of stuck on my radar. And then at just the right time, I had a meeting where the person again said, you really need to try this church. And then I was like, oh, this is supposed to happen now.
Yeah. I mean, we were in the middle of this journey, right? And starting to feel genuine despair, right? Because we were getting to the end and being like, look, you know what? Let's just be grateful the kids found something they love. It's sound biblical teaching, and they're welcoming. Maybe we don't get to be involved at this level, but like, okay, we found,
we found like great music and, fun churches and nice people. We found things where we would enjoy Sundays, and that was just going to be, okay, it's going to be about the kids. So to find kind of a home where everyone's excited, or at least for situations for both of us, has just been very, it's a big day.
It's a big day. Feels like a big day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, hang in there if you're looking for something like this and you live in the LA area.
Come see us at New Abbey.
At least our very first experience with this church was completely amazing and warm and affirming, really affirming. And
affirming of all people. I mean, this is just not...
You don't have to be gay to go there. Like, that's not a...
No, there's lots that are not. I mean, it's what I mean. It wasn't a gay church. It's just a very affirming of all... people
and just they just teach that Jesus loves you, and that it's as simple as that, right? And so I mean, it's not like we've dug very deep into the theology or all of their specific teachings, etc., but what we encountered today. Oh, great.
Yeah.
So see but it's a definitely worth giving a try if you've been looking for a place that will embrace you. This felt like a big hug.
Yeah, and if, from all over the country where you're at, or world, I would say just really keep at it. If you are wanting a community and you are wanting to find a church, just don't give up, because there's many times we wanted to give up in the middle. So just keep searching, keep praying, keep seeking, and I think God will meet you where you're at and help you on that journey. I firmly believe that. So we love you, and we hope you have a fabulous week, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.